This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time position in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So in this video, we're going to create a Node.js and Passport app, and Passport is used for authentication of all types. We have local strategy, which is what we'll be using, where we deal with the database directly. We'll be using MongoDB. You can use OAuth, so Google, GitHub, Facebook, Twitter. You can use those to log in. You can use a JSON Web Token if you're using something like React or Vue or some front-end framework. We're going to be doing everything on the server. We're going to use EJS to display our templates. We're going to be using Mongoose to deal with MongoDB, and there's some other packages we'll be using as well. So it's going to be kind of a long video. I don't want to do a series. I don't really like doing the series because usually the first video gets a ton of views and then it just kind of falls off. So I don't really like doing those. But this is a redo of a series I did about 3 years ago. For those of you that remember, I had a Node and Passport application that I built, and the code was just horrendous. I just updated it today, and I think we all go through that when we look at our old code, and it's just cringeworthy. But I updated it, so now I'm updating the series, or rather video in this case. So this is it right here. This is basically the welcome page, so we can choose to register or log in, and you can use this kind of as a boilerplate for any application that you want to implement server-side authentication with. So let's say register, and we're using Bootstrap. We're actually using Bootswatch, which is a themed Bootstrap file. And we're gonna just log in here or register. I think I actually already have myself registered, so let's use a different name. We'll say Sam Smith. Let's do sam@gmail.com. And we're using validation as well, as you can see. So we're gonna implement that and register. So now it says we're registered and we can log in. So let's try it, sam@gmail.com. Okay, once we log in, it's going to take us to the dashboard, and it says welcome Sam Smith, and we can log out. Now this dashboard is protected, so you have to be logged in to actually get to this route. So if I log out and I go to /dashboard, you'll see that it doesn't let me. It just tells me I have to log in to view this resource. So that's what we'll be building, guys. Hopefully you enjoy this project. We're going to jump into mongodb.com because we need to create our database. Now you can download Mongo and install it locally if you want. We're going to be using Atlas, which is basically Mongo in the cloud. It's really easy to get set up. I just did a video on it about a month ago. Some of you guys may have seen that. But you just want to register. So if you go to Get MongoDB, fill this out, and just register and then hit login. And I'll go ahead and log in. And the way that this works is you create what's called a cluster, and you get one free cluster. Okay, and I've already created mine. I called it Test Cluster 1. So if you don't have one yet, just hit Build New Cluster. Choose AWS for your provider. Your region will probably be selected already. And right here, you want to choose Free Forever, the free plan. It'll probably be selected by default. And then you can rename your cluster if you want, and then just hit Create Cluster. Okay, and then that will create it. Now it does take a couple minutes to create, so you might have to wait a few minutes. You should be able to hit the security tab though, even if it's still getting set up. You do need to add a user, okay, because the way that you connect is through a URI string, and you need to have your username and password. So if you go add new user, put your username, your password, and read and write to any database, and then add user. Okay, once you do that, you want to go to IP whitelist and add IP address, and you could add your own IP address just by clicking this button, or you could do just all zeros like that, and that should just be, you know, anyone that has your password and your username should be able to connect, and that's what I have here. All right, so that should be all you need to do. Create the cluster, create the user, and add your IP address. All right, and then once your cluster's set up, if you click connect, you can get your connect string by clicking right here, connect to your application, and then either one of these. The first one's going to be shorter. But yeah, here's the connection string, and that's all that you're going to need. And we'll implement this later on. All right, so now we're going to jump into VS Code, and I just have an empty folder called Node Passport Login. We're going to run an npm init -y. Okay, so it's going to create our package.json file. It's going to look like this. I'm going to explain everything, but I'm going to go kind of fast because I don't want this to be too long of a video. And I expect that a lot of you guys know the basics of Node. I do have a Node.js for beginners crash course on YouTube. I have an Express crash course. I have a Node.js Udemy course. So there's plenty of resources as well as other content creators. So let's install our dependency. So we're going to say npm install, or I, and we want Express, which is our framework. We want let's see, we want bcrypt because we want to encrypt our passwords. I'm sorry, bcrypt.js, because you never want to store plain text passwords. We need passport for authentication, and then any strategy that you use with passport, you need to install as a separate package. So we want passport-local because we're using a local strategy. We're also going to need EJS, which is our template engine that we're using. And EJS by default doesn't have layouts, so we're going to install express-EJS-layouts. Okay, we're also going to need Mongoose to deal with MongoDB, and we're going to use connect-flash for flash messaging, and connect flash depends on express-session as well. And I think, let me just make sure, I think that's everything that we need. Yeah, that should be everything. So let's run that, and those are all going to get installed. They're going to get added to our package.json. Okay, now there's one dev dependency that I want to install, and that's nodemon. So we're going to say npm install -D for dev dependency, and then nodemon. And that's just going to make it so that we don't have to keep restarting our server every time we make a change. It'll just constantly watch it as we save our files. Okay, so now I just want to add a couple scripts. We want a start script. So if we deploy this thing, it'll just run node app.js. That's what I'm going to call our file. In fact, we can change this right here from index to app. And then let's see, let's put a comma here, and let's copy this down. And we want a script to run our nodemon app.js, and I'm going to call this dev. That way we can just do npm run dev, and it will run nodemon. So let's save this and close it up. And we're going to create our app.js file. And let's go ahead and bring in Express. And let's just do a basic Express server first. So we'll initialize our app variable with Express. And let's go ahead and create a port to run our app on. We're going to use process.env.port, okay, in case we deploy, or 5000 on our local host. And then we're going to take our app object and call listen, which will run a server. We need to pass in the port, and then we can do console.log, and I'm going to put in some backticks here so I can use a template string with a variable. And I'm going to say server started on port, and then put in our syntax to put in a variable. All right, so this should run. Let's go ahead and try it. So I'm going to clear this up and do npm run dev. And server started on port 5000. Now we don't have a route or anything, so if we do go to localhost port 5000, it's just going to say cannot get slash because we don't have a route for that. So we're going to have separate files for our routes. So I'm going to create a folder called routes. And we're going to have two files in here, index.js, and we might as well create our users.js as well. So anything that's like slash, for instance, the home page, which is just slash or slash dashboard, those are going to go in the index.js, and then user/login, user/registers, those routes will go in here. So our index.js, we're going to be using the express router. So let's say const express, we need to bring that in. And then to use the express router, we need to create a variable called router and set that to express.router. And then let's do module.exports equals router. And then whenever we want to create a route, we simply say router dot, and then whatever the method, in this case it's a get request. So we're going to handle just the home page or the index page. And for now, let's just put an arrow function with a request and response object. And I just want to take the response and call dot send, and we'll just send the text welcome to the browser, just to make sure that this works. Now it's not going to work just yet because in our app.js we have to add down here, let's say routes, and we're going to say app.use. Let's say app.use slash, and I want that to pertain to, let's say require, I want that to pertain to that index file that's in the routes folder. So ./routes/index. Okay, so now if we go back here and we reload, we should see the text welcome. Okay, so let's see, we might as well just copy what we have in the index.js routes, go to users, paste that in, and let's do /login, and we'll just send the text login. So we'll say login page, and then let's just grab this, let's copy this down, and this will be the register. So this will be /register. Okay, just to get the routes down for just the displaying the pages. Now in our app.js, we're going to have to do the same thing for /users, and we want that to pertain to routes/users. Okay, so now if I go to localhost 5000 /users/login, we get login, and if I go to /register, we get register. All right, so now that we've done that, let's start to set up our views so that we can actually create our UI. So we need to bring EJS into app.js. We actually don't need to bring it in. We need to initialize it. We do, however, need to bring in express layouts. So let's say express layouts, and we want to set that to require express.ejs-layouts. And then we need to add a bit of middleware. So let's say EJS. We need to do app.use express layouts, and then we need to just do app.set, and we need to set our view engine to EJS. Okay, and make sure this is above this, or the layouts won't work. Okay, we'll save that. Now we need to create a folder for our views. And inside views, we're going to have a file called layout.ejs. So that's going to handle the layout around all of our views. And we might as well just create all of our views. We'll have welcome, which will be the home page. And these should all have EJS extensions. We're going to have login.ejs and register.ejs. And then we're also going to have a dashboard. Okay, and I think, let me just make sure that that's it. We are going to have a partial for the messages, but we'll get to that later. So let's go to our layout EJS, and I'm going to type this out, but the other views I'm probably just going to paste in just to save some time. But the layout, let's go ahead and generate a boilerplate with Emmet. So we'll do exclamation enter or tab. And for the title, we'll say Node.js and passport app. And like I said, we're going to be using bootswatch. So let's head over to bootswatch.com. And basically, I mean, you can pick from any of these themes. I'm using this journal theme. So if I click download, it gives us the CSS. I'm just going to grab the link here and use that. So let's go. right here and say link, paste that in. We're also using Font Awesome. So let's go to fontawesome.com and grab this and put that right here. Okay, now we are going to use the flash messages. I'm using dismissible alerts, the Bootstrap dismissible alerts. So we do need the JavaScript. So we'll go to getbootstrap.com. Get started, and then we'll grab, we don't need the CSS, we already have the boot swatch CSS, but we do need these 3 script tags, and we'll put that in the layout right above excuse me, right above the ending body tag. Okay, so let's put in the body, let's do a container class, and then we want to output any views that are supposed to be displayed. And the way that we do that with what are we using? EJS is we use an angle bracket %, and then a hyphen, and then the word body, and then we do % and then angle bracket. Okay, so that's going to basically output whatever view that should be output on that page. So let's save this. And now if we go to welcome EJS and just put an H1 in and say welcome and save this, this is what we want to render for the index page. Now remember, we go to our routes, index.js, and we have the route for that page. So we're going to do res.render, and the view that we want to render is welcome. Okay, so now if I go back to localhost 5000, we should see an H1 with welcome. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paste in the views. Now if you want, you can go to the repository. I'll have the link in the description to the repository. Let me see, it's right here. So if we go to views and let's see, let's go to welcome EJS and just grab this markup right here and go to welcome EJS, and I'm going to paste that in. So basically it's just Bootstrap markup. We have a row, or we have margin top, we're moving it down. 6-column div here, M auto, we'll push it to the middle. We're using a card, so we have a border and some padding. H1 has the Node.js icon, and then we just have a register and a login button. So let's save that and let's check it out. So if we reload, it should look like that. All right, now let's do the register. Right now it's just showing the text register. What we want to do is render the register template. So we'll go to our route, users.js. Let's change this to render, and then this will render login, and then we want this one to res.render register. Okay, so let's grab from the repository, let's grab views register EJS, and I'm going to just copy this, and let's go to register EJS, paste that in, and I'll just quickly go over this again, just using the Bootstrap grid where we have an H1 with an icon register. This right here, this include partials, I'm actually going to comment that out for now. And then we have our form. The action is going to go to users register, and it's going to be a post request. And then we're just sending our name. We're sending, type ID, name, class, placeholder. Now the value here, we have some EJS in here, because what this is saying is that if there's a name, like if we type something in and then the validation doesn't pass, we don't want the form to completely clear. We want to keep whatever's in there. So we're saying if type of name is not equal to undefined, then we want to display whatever that name variable is. Okay, and we're going to pass that into this view if we need to. Else, then it's just going to be blank. So we have this for all of the values here. Okay, so that's what that is. And then at the bottom, it just says have an account. If we do, then we have a link to log in. So we'll save that. Let's make sure that renders. So if we go to register, could not find the included file messages, partial messages. I commented it out. I guess Comments don't work in EJS. I didn't know that. All right, we'll just delete it for now. Okay, so we have our register. Now let's grab the login. So I'll go back to the repository, views, login EJS. Basically the same thing, except it goes to the login route. Paste that in login EJS. We'll get rid of the include for now. But basically the same thing, it's just getting submitted to user's login. So let's save that and go back. Okay, now we should be able to click the login here. Good, so now the register and login pages both display. We might as well do the dashboard while we're at it. So let's see, we'll go to views, dashboard EJS, which is very simple. And go to dashboard EJS and paste that in. Okay, and it's going to show this user.name. Once you're logged in, once we set up Passport and all that, we'll have access to the user object, and we'll have access to all the fields that we have in our database. All right, so the EJS should be all set up. So let's close that up. Let's just close all of these. It's probably confusing you guys having so many open. All right, so we have our views. Now what I want to do is bring in Mongoose, connect to our database and so on. So up at the top here in app.js, let's bring in Mongoose. All right, and then we want to connect to our database, so we're going to go right down here, and actually, you know what, we need to create our config file, our config folder. So let's do that. Create a folder called config, and I'm going to store the Mongo string, the connection string, in a file called keys.js. Okay, in keys.js, we're just going to say module.exports, and we just want to export an object, and let's do Mongo URI. And then we'll put our Mongo URI in here. Let's see, so I'm going to go back to Atlas, go to connect, what I showed you before, connect your application, this one right here, and we're going to grab this. Okay, so once we grab that, we can paste that right in. Now you just need to put your password in right here. Mine's the same as my username, and we'll save that, and now we can bring this into our app.js file so that we can connect to our database. So let's go right here, let's say db-config, and let's require, we want to set a variable of db. We'll set that to require our keys file, which is in config/keys, and then we want the Mongo URI, like that. All right, so we'll set that, and then we can connect to Mongo. And the way that we do that is by using Mongoose, and we want to use .connect. Okay, and we want to pass in our DB. Now, we're going to get a warning spit out at us unless we put in this object here, and we put in use right here, use new URL parser, and we want to set that to true. If we don't do that, we're going to get some complaints in the console. So we want to do that, and then this will return a promise. So we're actually going to go on the next line and do a .then and a .catch. Okay, if the .catch, if we have an error, then let's go ahead and just console.log it. Okay, .then. We'll just console log. Let's console log MongoDB connected, like that. Okay, and now down here you can see when I save, server started, and then we get MongoDB connected. All right, so our database is connected. Now what I want to do is create our model. Okay, so we need to create a user's model, or user model. So we'll create a folder called models. And inside there, we'll create a file called user, uppercase U, user.js. And then we just need to basically put in, we need to create a schema with all of the different fields that we need for a user. So we're going to bring in Mongoose. All right, and then we're going to create our schema. So let's say const user schema, and that's going to equal new mongoose dot schema. All right, and then here we're going to pass in an object with all our fields. So we're going to have a name, and we're going to say that type is going to be a string. Okay, and then we want this to be required. So we'll say required true. All right, and then let's just copy this down. See, we need 3 more. So let's change this one, the second one, to email. Also going to be a string, also required. Next one is going to be password. Okay, and then this last one is going to be date. And then date is going to be type of date. And let's actually change required to default, because we want to have a default value of whatever the date is right now. So we can do that with date dot now. All right, and then let's see, we want to export this. First, we'll just put this in a variable. So const user equals mongoose dot model. Okay, we want to create a model from our schema. So we pass in the model name, which is user, and then we want to pass in our user schema. And then we're just going to export this so that we can use it in other files. Okay, and that should do it. So let's save this, and we can close that up. Now, first thing we're going to work on is the registration. Let's see. Now, since we're getting data from the form, we need to add in our body parser middleware, which now is part of Express. Before we had to install body parser as a separate module, but now it's actually included with Express. So let's put that right under the EJS middleware. Okay, so we can simply say app.use express.url encoded. Just like before, we would do body parser URL encoded. Now we can do this. Whoops. And we just want to pass in extended false. That way we can get data from our form with request.body. Let's see, what else are we doing here? Yeah, so let's go to our routes users.js, and remember, when we submit our registration form, it's going to make a post request to /users/register. So let's say register handle. We'll do router.post because we're handling a post request to users/register. We don't have to put in user because we're already in that file, and we basically said, you know, connect users to this file. So let's say /register. Put an arrow function here, request response. All right, and just to test this out, let's do a console log, and let's do request.body. Okay, and then I'll just do res.send whatever, hello. Okay, I just want to see if what we pass in the form actually is going to be in this request.body. So let's go back to our application, close this stuff up, and in our application, let's go to our register, and let's put in some stuff here. Doesn't really matter what, and log in. So that's just going to show hello, but what we want to look at is our console down here, and you can see that we have all of our information from the form. All right, good. So now let's put each thing into a variable, and I'm going to use a little bit of destructuring for that. So if we do const and then some curly braces, we can pull stuff out of request.body. Okay, so we can pull out, for instance, name, email, password, and password2. Okay, so we're pulling those variables out. Now we should do, yeah, let's do our validation before we actually submit. Hold on. Yeah, let's do our validation. So we're gonna actually just initialize an array called errors, and let's first check for, let's say check required fields. So we'll say if not name or not email. Basically, they're all required, so we're going to make sure that they're all filled in. All right, so if any of those, if this is true, then we want to take errors and we want to push onto it. I'm just going to push an object with a message, and the message will say, please fill in all fields. Okay, so that's the first check I want to do. Next, let's do check passwords match. So we'll say if password is not equal to password2, then let's do errors dot push, and we'll say message passwords do not match. All right. So the next thing I want to check is to make sure that the password is at least 6 characters long. So let's say check pass length. And there's a ton of ways to do this, guys. If you want to do something else, if you want to use some kind of third-party package or something, that's fine as well. I'm just trying to keep it simple here. So let's say if password dot length is less than 6, then we want to errors dot push an object with a message, and we'll say password should be at least 6 characters. All right, so that should be good for validation. Once we search for the user, once we begin to register the user, we want to search to see if it's already there, to see if that email already exists, and then we'll do another error. But this should be good for now. So I guess what we'll do is we'll say if errors dot length is greater than 0, that means that we have an issue. Else, let's just do res dot send, and we'll just say pass. Okay, now if there is an issue, okay, so if any of these are true, then I want to re-render the registration form. So let's do res.render, and we want to render register. Okay, and then we want to pass some stuff in. When we use EJS or any template engine, when we render it, we can pass in values, okay, basically variables. We want to pass in the errors, okay, because we want to basically loop through and display those messages. We also want to pass the data in because, again, if we look at the registration form, in our value, we're checking to see if name is here, email, or whatever, because we don't want the form to completely clear when we, submit the form and it's not valid. So let's pass in name, email, password, and password2. Okay, so let's save that. Now, we can try it out. So if we go to register, let's just refresh this. So if we log in, if we click login, we get nothing. If we put a name in, you can see it does stay there. That's what that value does. Let's put an email, and let's put a password. So this still doesn't work. The password needs to be 6 characters. They also need to match. So let's just do 1 through 6. Let's make a match and log in, and we pass. Now, obviously, I mean, we need to let the user know what the hell's going on when it doesn't work. So we need to have some errors here, some messages. All right, so what we'll do is create a partial. So in our views, we're going to create a folder called partials. And all a partial is just a piece of markup, you know, some HTML or whatever that we want to put inside of another template file. So we're going to call this, let's say new file, we'll call this messages.ejs. Okay, and then inside messages, we're going to check to see if errors exists. Okay, because right here, when we render the register, we're passing in errors. And when we render it normally in our GET request right here, we're not. So we need to check to see if those errors are there. So let's do that in messages. Now, EJS syntax, again, is angle brackets and %sign. So we're going to say if. And the way this works is very, very similar to React's JSX. Well, it's not specific to React, but that's what it's best known for. JSX is JavaScript inside the HTML, and that's basically what EJS is, only instead of using, you know, curly braces, we use these angle brackets and %, which is a bit ugly, but it basically does the same thing. We can do an if statement. We start it out. Oops. We start it out, and then we end it down here. Okay, but we have to have these tags in order to, you know, for that to be JavaScript. So the way that we test to see if the errors are there is by checking the type and making sure that if it's equal to undefined, that means that they're not there. So we're going to say if type of, which is just a JavaScript expression, we'll say if type of errors is not equal to undefined, then that means that there is an error. Now, if there's an error, we want to display that, right? We actually want to loop through them because errors is an array. So in EJS, we can use a for each. So we can do, well, I mean, it's JavaScript, so of course we can use it. So we'll say errors dot for each. Now, let's see, we're going to want to, it's kind of hard to write when you have to like separate it like this, but we're going to put a function in here. Okay, and we have to make sure that this has tags around it like this. And up here. Okay, so for each error, let's call it error. All right, and then inside here is where we want to put the message. Now remember, it's an object with a property of MSG or message. So let's put that in here. Now if you want to actually output with EJS, you want to put an equal sign. So we'll say error dot MSG, and then we'll close it. All right, so let's save that, and let's see if this works. So if I try to submit this, oh, you know what? We didn't insert it. We didn't insert the partial into register. So let's go back to register EJS, and we'll go ahead and put this in here. Now, to put in a partial in, we need to just say include. Let me just double check the syntax here. Yeah, so we just want to include partials / and then messages. Like that. That should work. So let's save it. And of course we could have just put this right inside register, but I'm going to be using this in login as well. So a partial this is a good good time to use a partial. So let's see, and there we go. Now this looks like crap. I mean, we obviously want these on separate lines. I want to wrap them in the Bootstrap alert markup. So what I'm going to do is go to getbootstrap.com, because I can't remember the markup for the dismissible alert. So we're going to go to components, alerts, and we want dismissing, okay, right here, because we want to be able to exit out. So what I'll do is just simply grab this, and inside of our messages here, I'm going to replace this. We'll put it back, but we want to put in our markup, and we just want to replace this line with what was just here, so error.msg. All right, and I guess I'll keep the alert warning. That's going to be like a yellow color. So let's save that, and now it should look a hell of a lot better. So we'll log in. Oh, this should actually say register, not login. Let's change that. Where is it? Right here. So register. And there we go. So passwords don't match, and we can close them up. Good. So we have the validation down. Now it's time to actually add it to the database. And notice we're not using Passport yet. Passport is for authenticating. All we're doing now is basically creating a resource or creating a user. And we also have to encrypt the password. That's another thing we have to do. So let's go back to our users route. And now we want to work in here because we want to deal with, if the validation passes. So we'll put a comment here, say validation passed. So now what do we want to do? We want to use our model, right? Because the way that Mongoose works is you create a model, such as user, and then you have methods that you can call on that model, like save, find, things like that. So we're going to bring in our model up top here. So we'll say const user equals require, and we're going to go outside of the routes folder into models, and then we want user. Okay, so we should now be able to call methods on user. Now before we submit the user, we want to make sure that it doesn't exist. So first thing we'll do is take our user model and we'll call find one, which is a Mongoose method that does just that. It finds one record. And our query is going to go in here. So we're going to say where email equals email. Okay, remember we have that as a variable. That's what's passed into the form, and we want to match it to a user in the database. Now this is going to return a promise. So we're going to say .then. And let's see, we'll say .then, and that's going to give us the user. And what we want to do is check for that user. Okay, so if there is a user, then what I want to do is basically the same thing we did here. We want to re-render the register form, and we want to send along an error. Okay, so I'm gonna just copy this, and I'll put a comment here. We'll just say user exists. We'll paste that in, and yeah, that should do it, except we just want to add a new error. So right here we'll say errors.push, and we want to push on MSG user, or let's say email is already registered, and that will pass it in here. Okay, and then this is going to have an else, and let's do well, I guess we'll just keep going. We'll test it after. Now, if there isn't a user, then of course we need to create a new one, but we have to encrypt the password. So we're also going to bring in bcrypt. So up here, let's say const bcrypt, and we're going to require bcrypt not .js, just bcrypt.js. Okay, and then let's go down, and inside the else we're gonna say const new user, and we're going to set this to new user. Okay, when you have a model and you want to create a new instance, or in this case a new user, we want to use the new keyword, and then we want to pass in the values. So we want to pass in name, email, and password. Okay, now this is just ES6 for this, so this is the same thing up here. You know, we're just shortening it, so just in case you don't understand that syntax. It's just an object. Now this password is going to be plain text, right? In fact, I guess what I'll do is I'll just console log new user, and let's just res.send hello. And I just do the res.send so it doesn't hang. What's this? True is not defined. Required true. Wait, what? Oh, this is in our model? Oh, required true. This should actually be lowercase. This isn't Python. T. All right. All right, sorry about that. So let's head back over to users.js. Let's actually try it out. And if we submit an email that isn't registered, we should at least see the console log of the new user. So let's do that. Let's try one that does exist. I believe Brad@gmail exists. I can actually check real quick in my cluster. Whoops. Collections. Let's see. No, it doesn't exist. Kevin Smith does, or Kevin@gmail. So let's first try one that does exist. We know Kevin@gmail exists, so we'll go ahead and use that. We have to pass validation as well. Okay, so email's already registered. Perfect. So now if we use Brad@gmail, which doesn't exist, we get hello, and if we look in the console, you can see the new user. Now, MongoDB adds, wait a minute. Okay, MongoDB adds an underscore ID. This is an object ID. It adds it automatically. Now, this is not in our database yet. Okay, we did new user, but we didn't call user save. This will basically create the instance, but we haven't saved it yet. And I can show you that if I go back into Atlas and I reload. You can see that Brad@gmail is not here. All right, so we know that this is working, but the password is plain text. We certainly don't want that. So let's get rid of these two lines. And let's say hash password. So we have to use bcrypt for this. And what we need to do is generate a salt. Okay, we need to generate a salt so that we can create a hash. So bcrypt has a method called gen_salt. Okay, and this takes in basically I forget what this is. It's like the number of characters, or if you want to look at the bcrypt documentation, you can do that. But we want to pass in 10 here, and then we have a callback, in this case an arrow function. And this is going to give us an error if there is one, and then salt. Okay, so it's going to give us our salt. And then we want to do bcrypt.hash. And this hash is going to take in our plain text password and the salt, and it will give us a hash back. Okay, so let's pass in our plain text password, so new user, which is the object we created right here, the password, so we can get that with .password. And then it also takes in the salt that we just generated with gen_salt, and then it's going to give us a callback. So let's use an arrow function here. Actually, let me see here. So this will give us, let's open up some curly braces here. So this will give us an error, possible error, and the hash itself. So basically the hashed password. Let's put this on a new line. Yeah, we'll go like that. I don't have prettier. I usually have the prettier extension enabled in VS Code, which will kind of format everything automatically, and I think that that's made me lazy with as far as formatting my code. All right, so we'll get the hash right here. Let's check for the error. Actually, we'll just do if error throw error. Okay, and then we want to set the new user dot password. We want to set that now to the hash. Okay, so now it's not gonna be plain text anymore. It's gonna be the hashed password, and then we just need to save the user. Okay, so we'll put a comment here. We'll say set password to hashed, and then let's go ahead and save the user by saying new user dot save. Now this will give us a promise, so let's do dot then and dot catch. Okay, if it gives us an error, then we'll just console log it, and if it passes, if the user gets saved, then we want to redirect. We want to redirect to the login page, because right now we're registering a user. So in this dot then, it will give us the user back. And let's do res dot redirect, and we'll redirect to /login. All right, so let's try this out. So I'm going to go to my register page, and let's try to register myself. And the password should get hashed. So we'll go ahead and check this out. Let's register. So it redirected me to, oh, it's supposed to be user's login, but that's not important. Let's see if it actually got saved. So we'll reload. And right here, Brad Traversy, Brad at Gmail, and if you look at the password, it's completely hashed. We also have our object ID. So everything works. We just need to change the redirect to go to users/login. Now, I would like it to say, you're now registered, you can log in, instead of just going to the login page. So since we want, let me just get rid of this. Since we want the message to be shown after a redirect, we need to use what's called a flash message, which basically stores it in a session. It stores the message in a session and then displays it after the redirect. What we do here when we show messages, we're actually rendering a view, and we're just passing these messages in. When you redirect, it's a different story. So we have to implement connect flash. Okay, so that has its own middleware. So we have to go to app.js. And it also needs express session, which we also installed. So let's see, we're going to bring in up here. This is app.js. We're going to bring in flash. We're going to set that to require connect dash flash, and then let's also say const session, and we'll set that to require express dash session. All right, now the middleware for this, let's see, we'll go down. Let's put this, we'll go right under the body parser, and let's put the express session middleware, and we can actually get this from the documentation. Just search for express session, and we want what's the GitHub page? I'll just go to it from here. Okay, so this is the express session GitHub, and we want this. Yes, we want this right here. If you want to copy it from the repository, you can do that as well. So app.use session secret, doesn't matter what this is. We'll just say secret. Resave. we actually want to set that to true. And then save uninitialized will keep it true. We don't need this cookie right here. I'm not exactly sure what resave and save uninitialized is. I just know that this is the correct middleware. All right, now we also need to add a line of middleware for connect flash, which is just app.use, and we want to pass in flash. Okay, so now that we've done that, so now we should have access to request.flash. But what I'm going to do is, since we're going to have a different colors for different messages, like we want the yellow for errors, we want green for success, I'm actually going to create some global variables for that. So let's say global vars. And the way that we can do this is just by adding our own middleware. We'll say app.use, and then we can just put a function in here. Actually, we'll do an arrow. So we can just put a function that takes in request, response, next. Okay, so anytime you want to add middleware, we can just do this. And we can set global variables by doing res.locals dot, and then whatever we want the variable. In this case, I'm going to use success_msg. And I want to set that to request.flash, because since we implemented connect flash, we have this flash object, and then I want to pass in just success_msg like that. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing for error message, except it's going to be locals error message. All right, so, and then we just need to call next. Okay, so we just have a piece of custom middleware that has some global variables in it, and we should be able to call this success message and error message, and it's going to come from Flash. Now, back in our users.js, when we redirect, we want to call that Flash message right before that. So what we can do is simply pass in request.flash, and we want to pass in here success_message, and then we'll put our text and we'll just say you are now registered. We'll say you are now registered and can log in. Okay, so I mean, this takes care of creating the Flash message, but we have to display it. So to do that, I'm actually going to go into our messages.ejs, and we're going to do the same type of thing we did for the errors that were passed in. Now, the way that this success message is going to work, this global variable we created, if it's not there, it's just going to be an empty string. So that's what we're going to check for. So let's go under this, and let's do an if. So we're going to say if, and then we should be able to just check for success_msg, and we should say if that is not equal to an empty string, then we want to show the message. Okay, but we need to put our EJS tags in here. All right. So if there's a success message, then we want the same kind of dismissible alert. So I'm going to copy this whole div, paste that in, but I'm going to change it to alert success so that it's green. And then instead of error.message, we simply want to put in our success_message variable. Okay, and then we want to do the same for error message. So I'll copy this whole thing, and we'll change this to error_msg. We'll change the success back to warning and change this to error message. Okay, so this should now work because actually it shouldn't work just yet because our login doesn't have the include of the partial right here. So I'm just going to grab this and put this in login EJS right below the H1. Okay, so now we'll go and try this out. I'm actually going to go to my atlas and delete some of these guys. I'll delete all of them. Alright, so let's go back and refresh our register, and we'll just go ahead and register a user. And there we go, you are now registered and can log in. Okay, so we had to use the flash message because, again, we're redirecting, so we're storing it in the session. So our registration is complete. Now we're going to move on to the login, and this is where Passport comes in. So let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way to teach this. Let's close up everything just to kind of start from scratch here. Now remember, I said we're using a local strategy. Now we have to put this inside of a config file, and we're going to call this Passport. I mean, you don't have to put it in a config file, but I think it's the best way to do it. So inside here, we want to create our strategy. So we're going to say const, and we're going to call this local strategy. And this stuff is all in the documentation of Passport if you want to check that out. It's not very organized, but it is in there. So here we want to require, let's say require passport-local, and then we want to say .strategy. Okay, so we're bringing in the local strategy, and then we're also going to bring in Mongoose because we're logging in, which means we need to check to see if the email matches, the password matches. So we're going to be using Mongoose for that. So we'll require Mongoose. All right, and then we also want to bring in bcrypt because we need to decrypt the hash to make sure that the passwords match. So let's say bcrypt, or not bcrypt, but compare the hash to the plain text. Let's do require bcrypt.js. Okay, and then we're going to bring in our user model. So let's see, / outside of the config, then into models, and then we want user. All right, now we want to export the strategy that we're going to create. So module.exports, and this is actually going to be a function, and this is going to take in Passport. We're going to notice I didn't include Passport up here. We're going to pass it in from the app.js file. So we want to take that Passport object and just say passport.use, and then we want to say inside here new local strategy, and we want to add in some options such as username field. Now you could have username if you want. We're not using a username, so we want to say email is going to be our username. This should actually be a string. All right, so username field is email, and then after the curly brace here, we're going to put in our arrow function, and this is going to take in three things. It's going to take in email, password, and done. So basically, the first thing we need to do is match the user. We want to first check to see if there's an email in the database that whatever they pass in, is there an email with that, or I'm sorry, is there a user with that email? So let's say match user. All right, so the way that we can do this is by using Mongoose. We'll do find one, just like we did with the validation, and we'll say see if there's an email that matches this email. And then if there is, we're going to get a promise, so we'll do .then, and let's also do .catch. All right, so for .catch, all right, in the .then, let's see, yeah, inside the dot then it's going to give us the user. It's either going to give us the user or it's going to give us null, I believe. So we want to say user, then we'll use an arrow function. We'll say if not user. Okay, so basically if there's no match, then what do we want to do? We want to return done. Okay, done is this callback here. We always want to return done, but we want to pass in null for the user, right? I believe, no, null is the error. We don't want to send an error, but we do want to say, as you can see right here, it's error, the user, and then options. So we'll say null for the error, false for the user, and then for the options we're going to put in our message. Okay, and our message is going to be that email is not registered. Okay, so that's what we want to happen if the user is not there. If it is there, then we're going to keep going. Now, we haven't dealt with the password yet. We've only matched the user email. So obviously the next thing we want to do is match the password. Now, to do that, we need to use bcrypt because the password in the database is hashed. The password they submit is not. So we're going to take bcrypt and we're going to call a method called compare. And this actually takes in the password, which is going to be passed right here. Okay, so we want to take that password, and then we want to take the user.password, which is the hashed password. Because remember, this user is coming from the database, right? We're finding the email. If it matches, it skips this, and we now have the hashed password, and we're also passing in the plain text password. So we want to basically compare these, and then we have a callback. Okay, and then this callback is going to have an error, a possible error, and then is match. This will be a Boolean. Okay, so if it matches, that'll be true. Let's just check for the error, and we'll say throw error. And then we'll check for is match to see if that's true. Okay, so if is match is true, that means that the user, that it's passed, right? So we want to return our done function, and we want to pass in null for the error and then user for the user. Okay, up here we return done, but we return false for the user. This time we're actually passing in the user. Else, if it doesn't match, then we want to return done. We want to pass in null, and we want to pass in false because it doesn't match, and then a message, just like we did above. Okay, and for our message, I'm just going to say password incorrect. All right, now that is our local strategy. Now there's a couple other things we need to do here after our exports. I'm sorry, not after our exports, but after our strategy. We need a method for serializing the user and deserializing the user. We have to call those methods. And if we go to the passport documentation, let's see, and like I said, this documentation gives you everything you need, but it's like out of order. It's not very easy to understand. But what I'm looking for is the serialize and deserialize. Let's see. So this is kind of what we were just doing. No, it's not. That's what we still need to do. What we did. Let's look over here. Yeah, I hate this documentation. Authenticate. We're going to do that. Configure. Right here is what we just did. So passport.use, local strategy, username, password, done. Look for the user. We return done. Blah blah blah. This is exactly what we just did. What the hell is it? Right here. So this passport serialize user, deserialize user. In a typical web application, the credentials used to authenticate a user will only be transmitted during the login request. If authentication succeeds, a session will be established and maintained via a cookie set in the user's browser. Each subsequent request will not contain credentials, but rather the unique cookie that identifies the session. In order to support login sessions, Passport will serialize and deserialize user instances to and from the session. So that's what this does. Okay, and we're going to grab both of these, copy it, and we're going to go and put this right in here. All right, yeah, just like that. And then we should be all set with this file. Let me just double check this, make sure this is right. So done error, yeah. And if we want to keep this consistent, we'll do arrow functions here. Oops. All right. So that should work. Now what we need to do is add a couple lines of middleware. If we go back here, we need these two lines right here, passport.initialize and passport.session. So copy that, and we're actually going to put that inside of our app.js. Okay, and it's important where we put this. We want to put it after the express session middleware. Okay, we'll put it right between that and the flash. We'll say passport middleware. Okay, that's that. Now, passport is not defined. So basically, now this is initializing our local strategy, right? And it's telling us passport is not defined. Because we actually need to require this file in our app.js, and we need to pass in passport. So let's go up top, and we'll go right up to the top here, and let's say passport config. We're just going to simply require ./config/passport, and then we're going to pass in passport, which we actually have to bring it up here. So const all right. So if we save that, that error goes away. Good. And this file is now being required. All right, now we haven't created our route yet, right? When we submit this login form, when we submit this, it goes to users/login. It makes a post request to that route. So we have to handle that. We have to basically tell that route to use the local strategy. So let's head back over to routes users.js. We're going to go down to the very bottom here, and let's say login handle. And we're going to take router.post, because we're handling a post request to users/login. All right, now let's see, we're going to have to bring in passport to this file as well. So let's say const passport. And I can actually, I actually did show you in the documentation where it said passport authenticate. That's what we need to do. So if we go up here, you see app.get login, there's the function, and then they're calling passport authenticate, calling the local strategy, and then a function. And there's also some options that we can put in as well. So basically we have to do this. And it's important to remember to do this at the end. We have to put a set of parentheses with request, response, and next. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's say passport.authenticate. We're using the local strategy, pass in local, and we're going to pass in some parameters here. I want to do a success redirect. So on success, what do we want to do? We want to get redirect to /dashboard. All right, failure redirect. We want to go back to the login page, so /users/login. And then I also want to show a flash message, so we'll say failure flash, and we'll set that to true. Oops. Okay, and then we need to put, like I showed you, those parentheses and then request response next. Okay, and that should implement our strategy. So we'll save that. Now let's go back to our application and let's try to log in with something that's not going to work. So I'll say like tech guy info. Next is not defined. Oh, we have to put next right here. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so it just reloads the login page, right? Now, in order to show that flash message, what it does is it gives us request, I think it's request.error. No, it's actually in request.flash error. So I'm actually going to put that as a global variable like we did with the other messages. So right here in global variables, we'll copy this down, and this is going to be just for error because that's what it's going to be put in when we say show the flash for passport. Okay, and then we're going to go back into messages because we need to check for it and display it if it's there. So it's basically going to be the same as this. So we'll copy this, except it's just error, not error message. So we'll get rid of that, and then we'll go ahead and just show error. So we'll save that. Now, if we try to log in, let's reload this. If we try to log in with something, that email is not registered. Okay, if we do, let's see, what is registered? Okay, so we have Brad at Gmail is an actual user. So let's do Brad at Gmail, but let's do the wrong password. And we get password incorrect. All right, so let's do Brad at Gmail, and let's do the correct password. And log in. And we get redirected to the dashboard. Now we haven't created that route yet, but the login system is working. The registration's working, the login is working. All we have to do now is create the dashboard and the logout. So let's do that. Let's go to our index route, and let's see, we'll put a comment here. This is the welcome page. And let's see, we'll copy that down. So we'll say /dashboard, and we want to render the dashboard view, which we'll save. And then let's see, our dashboard EJS. This user.name, this is going to give us an error right now because we're not passing that in yet. So I'm just going to say welcome user, and then I'll put that back after. But now if we go to dashboard and reload, we can see it. Now let's give functionality to this logout. Okay, so I'm just going to make it so that if we make a GET request to /logout, then it logs us out. So in our routes users.js, let's go down here and let's say logout handle. And let's say router.get logout. All right, now logging out is actually very easy. All we have to do is call request.logout. Using the passport middleware, it gives us the logout function. We can just do that. But I do want to send a flash message and redirect. So I'm going to say request.flash. Whenever you want to send a flash message, we can just do that, request.flash. And we're going to use success_message. underscore message, and then the text will just say you are logged out, and then we'll redirect. So res.redirect, and we want to redirect to the login like that. Okay, and that should do it for logout. So let's save. Let's go back and click logout. You are logged out. Now, as it is, I can go to dashboard even though I'm not logged in, which we need to fix. So what we need to do is implement ensure authenticated. So let's go and let's create inside config a file called auth.js. Okay, so this is like an auth guard. So let's say module.exports equals an object called, and then we're going to have a property here called ensure authenticated, or a function called ensure authenticated. And let's say function, and then this is going to take in request response next, and we have a method attached to the request object called isAuthenticated, so that's what we want to check for. Okay, so Passport is giving us all this stuff, like this isAuthenticated. So let's do that, and then if we're authenticated, we just want to simply return next. Else, or we don't even need an else, we'll just put here request.flash, and let's do an error message. And let's say please log in to view this resource, and then we just want to redirect. /login. Okay, so now we should be able to bring this file in, and we should be able to add this as middleware to any route. So any route that we want to be protected, we just need to add this to. So let's go back to index.js, and we want this dashboard to be protected. So what we have to do is bring in, let's say const ensure authenticated, and we want to bring that in from require, and we're going to go .. /config/auth. Okay, and then all we have to do is pass it in as a second parameter like that, and now it's protected. So we'll save, let's reload, and we can't view it. Okay, now I want the username to be able to show, so what I'm going to do is when I render the dashboard, let's just put this on a new line. When I render the dashboard, I'm going to pass in an object, and I want user to be set to the request.user, because when we're logged in, we have access to request.user, and then any field like name, email, and so on. So we're going to pass that in. Actually, I think a better thing would be just to do request.user.name and set this to name. That way we don't pass the entire user in, just the name. And then back in our dashboard EJS, let's go ahead and replace this with our EJS syntax to put in a variable, and we'll just say name. All right, let's try that out. So we'll log in. We can see our dashboard, and we get welcome Brad Traversy. Awesome, we can log out. All right, so that's going to be it, guys. I know this was a friggin' long video. I only expected it to be about an hour or so, but I guess it was quite a bit of code. And don't worry if you don't understand every single line, everything we did. And feel free to use it as a boilerplate for future applications. If you want to build a blog or something, you now have authentication in place. If you want to add extra fields, that should be easy. Just update the model and the stuff in your routes and so on. But that's going to be it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave it a like, and I'll see you in the next video. So I just want to give a quick shout out to two of my top patrons, Carlos, who has his own great YouTube channel for developers, and Igor from parkflyerexplorer.com, who offers SEO solutions for those of you that are looking to rank your website high in Google and generate more visitors. So I'll have both links in the description below.